Take it away when you're ready, Anna.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Annalisa Kern, the co-chair and social media coordinator of Clintonville Green Team. And on behalf of Clintonville Green Team, I want to welcome you to the last of the three Clintonville Green Team winter webinar series. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a great time and learn a lot. Before we jump into the webinar, though, I do have two quick announcements. The first of which you see on the screen right now, Columbus Arbor Fest. It's officially slated for Saturday, August 23rd. It'll be at Whetstone Park again, but unlike last year, we got some feedback. People wanted to actually have more time at Columbus Arbor Fest. So based on that feedback, we actually extended the hours from noon to 5 p.m. So bring a family, bring friends, kids activities, adult activities, lots of stuff to do, lots of presenters. If you want to learn more, you can go to columbusarborfest.com, which you see on the screen right now, and just expect more to be added to that in the coming weeks. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, so we will be sharing even more information about that in the coming weeks. So get excited. But again, Saturday, August 23rd, noon to 5 at Whetstone Park. And it's for all of Columbus. It's free to join. So hope to see you there. The second of my two announcements will be the Clintonville Kick Butt Litter Cleanup, which is slated for Saturday, March 22nd from 11 o'clock till 3 p.m. We're going to be cleaning up the East North Broadway I-71 interchange. And the coordinator of this event has coordinated with Panic Lighting so that you can park in Panic Lighting and get all the supplies there. We can meet there, park there. So we hope to see you there. Panic Lighting is on Silver Drive. It's right behind Taz's Tire. If you want more information on that, we also have that on our website, clintonvillegreenteam.org, or you can reach out to us if you have any questions. Anyone can join, and there's also a link on our website so you can sign up, just so we can have a total number in our head of how many people to expect. So those are my two announcements. So now I want to welcome Cathy Tiffany. Welcome. She's going to be tonight's presenter for Create a Wildlife Habitat, which will focus on 5 easy steps to help you transform your yard into a wildlife habitat that not only attracts nature, but also puts a smile on your face as you get to enjoy a yard that is brimming with wildlife antics. Cathy is a passionate backyard enthusiast and a habitat ambassador for the National Wildlife Federation. She's a founder of Backyard Columbus, an educational blog and podcast where she shares the adventures in her backyard, from her chickens to her wildlife neighbors to her beautiful, beautiful plants. And through her blog and podcast, which stream on both Spotify and Amazon, Cathy encourages others to create a space for nature in whatever outdoor space you have. You can also follow along with her backyard shenanigans on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, all under the name Backyard Columbus. So watching this webinar tonight, we really hope that you will join Cathy in her mission to change the look of your suburban backyard into a patch, from just a patch of grass into an oasis for nature, adventure, and for beauty to thrive. So before I pass the mic over to Cathy, I just want to remind everyone that tonight's webinar will be posted online. It'll be on our website at clintonvillegreenteam.org. And all of our recordings, including the previous 2 webinars, will be free to access. Anyone can access them. And you'll just want to wait a few days for this one to be posted. The other 2 have already been posted, so you can look at them now while you wait anxiously for Cathy's to go up. And then we'll send out an email telling you when we upload this final webinar. And then my final reminder, just so we can keep the presentation running smoothly and so everyone can hear, please keep your microphones off during the presentation unless you are actively asking a question. Cathy has given permission for people to jump in if they have a simple question, more of a straightforward, maybe that you need some clarity on something she said, or maybe a yes or no. question. If you have a more involved question, then we just ask that you wait till the end of her presentation to ask that question. You can also, if you don't feel comfortable jumping in with your microphone and asking a question, you can always just ask your question via the Zoom chat. That'll be on your Zoom screen. And then I'm going to monitor that chat throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to address those questions as they come in. If you have any IT questions, feel free to drop that in the chat, and I will do my best to address those questions so that you can keep up with the webinar and not get sidetracked by some IT issues. But that's all I have. So please welcome Cathy Tiffany.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to do this presentation. I love giving this presentation because it's about plants, butterflies, and flowers. So it's nothing too heavy, and hopefully it will leave you feeling inspired and not dragged down by like lots of things you read about and how terrible everything is. There are definitely things in this department, at least, that we can do something about. So anyway, I'm happy to share this with you. So our house is situated on definitely less than a fourth of an acre, smack in the middle of the suburbs in Columbus. So we live in like the Dublin Worthington area. And when we got our house, and you'll see in the presentation, it had virtually nothing. It had 5 oak trees, which are awesome, but 5 oak trees, and literally that was it. Not one flower. Oh, I should say it had 5 perfectly spaced daffodils, like one little daffodil and then another one. So literally nothing other than that. And over the course of probably a decade to 12 years, it's taken us to transform this. But I view gardening as kind of like an evolution of a thing. You know what I mean? It just ebbs and flows, and you're like, hey, let me tweak this or let me tweak that, or let me add more plants and more plants and more plants and ponds and chickens. And so I am not at all proposing that anybody transform their yard into what you see in this presentation. I'm hoping that you take the pieces that you see that float your boat and incorporate those into your own yard. And I would also like to say, before I forget, that often in my podcast I say everybody doesn't have to have a yard because everybody doesn't have a yard. You can take bits and pieces of what I offer to you today and utilize it in your condo, in your apartment, on a patio, on a porch, on a balcony, or even in a couple of pots. So, because if everyone did that, because, look, everybody isn't physically able. You may not have the time and you may not have the money. So don't feel like that you're excluded from any of this because any of those may be a factor in your life. So just take the bits and pieces that work for you, and hopefully you'll find some bits and pieces that do work for you. So anyway, next slide, please. Oh, and I would also like to add that I am not an expert. I am not a master gardener, or nor do I have a degree in anything that I've done, but I feel like decently well read on the subject, and I'm very passionate about it. So that's where I'm coming from. And every picture, I think virtually every picture in this presentation is from our yard. I took it, and you can see the nothingness of that bottom picture. So that is how we bought our house. And then the top picture is more of a couple of years ago. So definitely an evolution. And this is with 2 people with full-time jobs. And my daughter was in national club sports, so traveling in and out of state all the time. So we just worked it in when we could. So a habitat ambassador with the National Wildlife Federation, like she had said, was a series of tests and actually a background check. And I blew through it pretty quickly because the tests that I needed to take included tasks to do, and I had already done it. So I thought, well, gosh, if I've already done all of this stuff, I may as well get a nifty title and be a habitat ambassador and help spread the word to other people, which is how I got connected with you guys. So I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to share everything with you. So The National Wildlife Federation has a great set of resources on their website. And look, just from little things of how you can add maybe some nectar producing, pollen producing plants to your space, all the way to, hey, I want a backyard habitat also. What does that entail? So I will tell you, obviously, like this slide says, you can start with 5 basic things, but you can also just start with one basic thing. I am a huge believer in small steps lead to big changes, not to be cheesy about it, but that's pretty true. So again, any part of any of this will get you off in a good direction. So next slide, please. So the first thing is food, because nothing survives without food. So listen, all of these, the next few slides are going to say any or all of these for, or any or some for a habitat certification. So our yard is a certified backyard habitat with the National Wildlife Federation. And I wanted to do it because I wanted to do all of the things and I wanted a nifty sign and be like certified. So then we bought a fancier sign as a matter of education. I don't think I have that picture in this presentation, but as a matter of education for people that pass by our yard all the time, because we're kind of a major walking route along our neighborhood. So for these things, like for food, we would have plants, like you see there, fruits, nuts, seeds, nectar, all that kind of thing, and supplemental feeders like a bird feeder. I would like to add 2 things. Number one, this is important. I get very excited about this, and sometimes I'll take a little side trip because I have another thought, and sometimes I don't find my way back. That doesn't typically happen when I have a PowerPoint in front of me, but you can certainly shout out, "Hey, Cathy, this is what you were talking about," if I seem like I'm lost. But the other thing is, because I just learned this a few years ago myself, that you go to a local nursery, and I'm going to talk like nobody knows anything about this subject at all, because I have been in talks where the person was speaking to like the experts in the room, and then I was kind of lost. So I'm going to act like y'all don't know anything about what I'm talking about, so no one feels lost. But you go into your local nursery, let's call it a Lowe's, and you're like, oh, look at all the pretty flowers. I'm going to buy this, 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 and this. And then you get it home because you wanted to build a butterfly garden, and 3/4 of what you bought was sterile, which means that the flower does not produce nectar and it doesn't produce pollen, or it's of such a junky quality that it didn't really do a lot of good for the local bees and butterflies. So I have helped a couple of friends redo their yards to incorporate a pollinator garden, pollinator or butterfly garden, whatever you want to call it. And listen, I am going to tell you that I am not a purist. So anything to me that you do to add native plants into your yard, I feel is better than nothing at all. Because maybe you'll keep doing more and more and more until you're all native, and that would be great. There's a very famous guy, Doug Tallamy. I honestly can't remember if he's a botanist, a horticulturist, an entomologist, or whatever, but he's a big deal in the native plant world. And he has an 80-20 rule. I think it's 80% native, 20% whatever the heck floats your boat, as long as it's not invasive. Thank you. He's an entomologist. I would say anything, because I know people who have nothing. So even if you start out with 2%, that's better than 0%. And then you'll be on your way and you can add more and more. So back to the flowers. See, I found my way back. Back to the flowers. It's always a safe bet to get a native plant, and then that is a surefire way to make sure that you are buying a good quality nectar producing or pollen producing plant. A lot of times, if you find a coneflower, for instance, and it says, I'm making this up, razzmatazz coneflower, it might be sterile, it might be junky quality nectar. So if that's if the razzmatazz coneflower or whatever it is the greatest color you've ever seen and you absolutely love it, then whatever, buy it. But then I would implore you to also buy the actual native coneflower, the echinacea, to make sure that it's of good quality. So my friend that I helped her, I think she loved roses or some hydrangea, fancy hydrangea thing because it reminded her of her grandmother. Well, neither one of those things are invasive, okay? So go ahead and plant that, because if I try to convince someone to not do any of that stuff, then I perhaps have lost my audience. So go ahead and plant that. But then the rest of the stuff I had her plant was native. So again, anything is better than nothing. So it will just start you on your way. So something native and a bird feeder, something native and a hummingbird feeder, that would be great. So that would be what we would try to do for food. So next slide. Oh, and I do see that someone said why the big oak was removed. And that actually is a really great question, because oak trees are a rock star to have in your yard. They host over 400, and I think it's actually over 500 species of butterflies and moths. So they are a big deal host plant. And if you do not know what a host plant is a plant that a butterfly or moth lays their eggs on, and those eggs that turn into caterpillars, they eat the leaves of the host plant. Perfect example is a monarch butterfly lays their eggs on milkweed because the caterpillars can only eat milkweed leaves. But back to why the oak tree was removed is because all 5 of the oak trees ended up with a disease, and they all had to be removed. So that was a bummer. We have replaced one in our front yard with a different kind of an oak because I want that rock star keystone species in our yard because it does so much good. As you can see in that top slide, it's kind of a bummer because it's going to end up shadowing those other plants. So I'm almost going to be sorry that I did it. But next slide, please. And I think the slide after that. Yes, the next slide. Yep, water. That is the second thing that we all need is water. So you can see have a bird bath and a pond. That second pond you see is a pond in our backyard. That third picture you see with the little tiny tadpoles in it, that's actually another pond that we have in the yard. And then the bottom picture is a pond that we put in next to our front porch that literally took 2.5 hours to add. So any of those things, actually the middle picture pond up there is a Rubbermaid cattle trough that we sunk into the yard. So we just got creative, and I'll share with you in just a minute all the cool things that have found their way into our ponds. But you can see those are several different ways that you can add water into your yard. I am not an expert on a rain garden, and I believe that one of the other speakers already talked about that. But you can just see that there are several ways that you can incorporate water into your yard, even if it is a simple bird bath. I would just encourage you to, if you're going to have a bird bath, probably remind yourself via your phone to clean that every once in a while because they get pretty disgusting pretty quickly. So next slide, please. Cover. So we all need a place to live. And you can see with all of those little bullet points how many different kinds of things that you can have. Look, a brush pile in the suburbs, that's probably going to be a hard sell, but there are lots of cool things, not just rats and skunks or whatever that like brush piles. The best thing is to incorporate some native bushes into your yard. You can see in that first picture that we have 2, and we actually have 3 different varieties of elderberries. And if you don't have an elderberry in your yard, I would encourage you to get one this year. They're really beautiful. That one on the left, and this is kind of getting down in the weeds, but the one on the left that has a little bit darker foliage, I'm going to slaughter. Anyway, it's a fancy kind of elderberry, black lace. I think it's a black lace elderberry. If you are of the persuasion that you like to can, or you like to make pies and things, or your own elixirs, elderberries give you so many berries, it's incredible. So it provides a flower in the spring for bees and butterflies. Later on in the summer, it provides fruit. I say for my birds. And a very interesting thing is the year that we were encouraged to take down all of the bird feeders because the bird flu got so bad, it was interesting. I have never seen all of the birds in my yard eat all of the elderberries off of the bushes that I provided for them. They always go to the bird feeders. Well, the year we had to take all the bird feeders down, then all of a sudden, all our bluebirds and everyone just ate from the elderberry bushes, which was cool because that's why I planted them in the first place. I believe in using the fruit that I produce off these trees, but I work a full-time job and I don't have time to figure out how to make an elixir. So I just let the birds have them, and that's all the same to me. So I have cover and I have food in one bush. So if any of you have kids or grandkids that you're trying to indoctrinate into the world of nature, this middle picture is a mason bee house. And mason bees do not need you to provide a house for them. I have one as a matter of education, and I get very geeked out about looking at all the stuff going on in my yard. So these little mason bees that are stingless, they don't produce honey, they're just great pollinators. They will be on all the crocuses any day now. This thing will be a flurry of activity of mason bees chewing their way out of the mud, other mason bees going in and laying their eggs and packing those little tubes full of mud. So it's just a really fun way to see what's going on. And on a side note, I have purchased glass straws and I made my own little mason bee house so I could maybe see the eggs that they laid with the mud. So they lay like 5 to 6 eggs in a tube. So I'm hoping to see all that. But anyway, there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate cover into your dwelling, whether it's a patio, balcony, or your whole yard. So next slide, please. And I will add that if any of your neighbors complain about bat boxes or bird feeders or even a brush pile, those things in and of themselves, because I go through this all the time with chickens, people thinking that the chickens in and of themselves attract rats, because Columbus does have quite a problem with rats. A brush pile is not in and of itself going to attract rats any more than your neighbor who has a shed that a rat can dig under would attract a rat. So that's your comeback to somebody who says something stupid like that. Anyway, that's probably strong. People just don't know, but sometimes they don't think either. So try to help educate them. So places to raise young. This picture is actually one of my most prized pictures. So under the heading of "If you build it, they will come," remember I told you we live smack in the suburbs. I mean, we are on two sides. One side of our house is basically we're one street away from Hard Road, and then a few blocks away from Sawmill Road, and then not very far away is 270 and 315. Okay, so I'm kind of in the middle of all that. So it is not at all like I am in the middle of a nature preserve. So we put the 2 ponds in the backyard. And one day, just because this is what I do in the summer, I go outside like I'm 8 years old and I go and I notice everything. Well, these are 2 swamp darners, dragonflies, one of North America's largest dragonflies. And they found our pond. I mean, again, this cattle trough is, I don't know, 3.5 feet wide. It's kind of like like an oblong shape. So let's call it 3 by 4. So it's not like I have a pond the size of a parking lot. These dragonflies found our pond, laid their eggs in this wood, and I watched them. If you can see where their tail goes up like a little J, they are digging and depositing and digging and depositing eggs into that log. And then anyway, those eggs drop into the water. They become little water nymphs. I call them water crickets, like little dragonfly nymphs. And then they come out as brand new dragonflies. And ever since then, that was probably 3 or 4 years ago, I have several species of dragonflies that come back to our yard every year. And again, I told you where we live. So they have found us. And it's just really exciting. I mean, if you love nature at all, it's just really fun to see how they find you. And all we did was put in a pond. So anyway, places to raise young is the fourth thing that we're on. So next slide, please. Okay, so you can see that there are a list and some of them kind of overlap, but I will tell you the first picture here is monarch caterpillars. So A milkweed plant is kind of a 2-for-1 deal. The milkweed will start growing actually in early summer, but the monarch butterflies do not arrive in central Ohio until about en masse about August, very late July or kind of early to mid August. It all depends. We might have a few stragglers arrive earlier than that and get all excited, and then you got to wait another month for everyone else to arrive. But common milkweed has a beautiful, subtle fragrance. I just love it. Me personally, if your brain is working and you're trying to think, okay, how can I start to landscape my space? My personal opinion is common milkweed. I don't recall how many species of milkweed we have native to Ohio. Might be at least 7. Okay, let's call it 5 to 7. Common milkweed is best for the backyard, in my opinion. It gets pretty messy. Um, Once it stops flowering, it's not a particularly nice looking plant. Okay, so I like to keep it in the backyard, but there are other species of milkweed that the butterflies are attracted to that you can put in the front yard, and it holds its form, and even the leaves look nice. So anyway, you'll have the flowers in the early summer, and then the monarch butterflies will arrive and they will lay their eggs on all of the leaves that will last throughout the rest of the summer. All right, so you've got the nectar producing stuff for the food in the early summer, and then you have food and a place to raise young in the form of cover and the food for the caterpillars. So again, you see I have a pond, so frogs and toads will utilize that. And actually the dragonflies, like I said, will utilize that because that's where their young has to go. It's really pretty sad. Apparently a lot of dragonflies lay their eggs on the hoods of cars because it reflects like a pond. So then the eggs just get incinerated, which is pretty sad. So, hey, if everybody can add a pond or two, that would be great too. Another thing, if you have an herb garden, black swallowtail butterflies, this is what got me started, actually. Now that I'm thinking about this, with the whole native plant thing and this whole, the habitats and the caterpillars and the butterflies and all that kind of stuff, I was putting in an herb garden and was at a nursery, and I was told that fennel, which is a member of the carrot family, fennel is one of the host plants for the black swallowtail butterfly. Oh, great. So I'm like, whatever, that seems nifty. So I put it in, and it was about like what, 12 inches tall. Okay, it's not very big. Within 2 months, I see there are caterpillars on my fennel. And it's not in this presentation, but the happiest little video set to music of this little caterpillar crunch munching his way through the fennel. And every year now, I mean, again, as long as you have the host plant, you will see the butterflies. And so, anyway, the fennel is one of the host plants along with parsley and dill and things like that for the black swallowtail butterfly. And they will come and just load them up. I mean, last year I had the numbers aren't in front of me, but well over 30 eggs because I get kind of nutty and I go out every day after work and I look at all my milkweed, I look at all my fennel and see if I can find eggs. And I do. And I have a butterfly cabinet outside. It's kept clean, but it is also kept outside. And upon the emergence of a butterfly that came out of its chrysalis, they are immediately set loose. So I'm not doing anything weird. And I have a habitat to support the butterflies that I'm raising. So if I can throw that out there for just a second, because I don't think there's anywhere else to put it, you can buy kits for your kids that you raise butterflies. And I think that's a wonderful educational opportunity for not only your kids, but for you as well. And I mean, at the end of the day, we could all just buy a bunch of butterflies and raise a bunch of butterflies, but that's not going to solve the problem if we do not have the habitat for them. And so on this slide, actually, may I interject one of the things that I talked about in my podcast today, and I alluded to in the beginning. So if any of you have heard, a statistic just came out. I was watching the news yesterday, and CBS and NBC both ran the same exact story. It was pretty doomy gloomy, but I mean, it was accurate. Not all news is great. There is a 22% decline of all butterfly species from 2000 to 2020. Okay, so they cited habitat loss, climate change, pesticide use, and those are all true. I mean, that is not a lie. But neither of those broadcasts mentioned in any detail at all how you could fix that, like what you could easily do to help counteract that. I mean, I think that it's it's very easy to feel like you can't make a change at all, especially in my opinion, when you start talking about climate change. I'm a climate change believer, but to the average person, when you're like climate change this and climate change that, I feel like people start to think, you're trying to battle big oil or something, and then they shut down and don't know what else to do. And while man-made or just natural climate change, whatever it is, this is why some of these things that we're talking about here are easy little things that you're not trying to fight the man. We're just trying to plant native flowers, just little bits at a time, and it really goes a long way, all the way to just a little herb garden. Okay? So anyway, I want to encourage you that when you hear things like there's all of this decline in species, like I always say, we're not trying to replant a forest for elephants or tigers. Okay, so this is not a large scale reforestation effort. Like again, Doug Tallamy with Homegrown National Park. We're just trying to take all of our little dwellings and connect them all together. And so, whatever you do that's positive in your own little dwelling, it will be part of a larger picture. And then we've kind of turned the tide and made a positive difference. So, I just want to throw that out there. That last picture on the top here, that is actually our native Carolina mantis. That is an Utica. That's the praying mantis nest. And right before I got on here today, two of my pictures disappeared off the PowerPoint. And so my husband had just cut down all of our boxwoods. Okay, nothing wrong with boxwoods. They're not native, but they're not doing any harm. They do provide cover and constant greenery all year round for your front yard. But we are going to choose to replace them with inkberry or winterberry or something like that, which are native because, why not go all the way in if you're me? So there were 5 bushes and they were pretty big. And I went through this afternoon every single branch to make sure, because we had a lot of native Carolina mantises last year, and I found 6, like 6 of those praying mantis nests. So I'm pretty excited about this summer. I'm going to have an invasion of native mantises. So anyway, you can see that you can add any of these things for a place to raise young. And even if it's just a nesting box, like a birdhouse, that is certainly better than nothing. So next slide, please. Sustainable gardening practices seems to be tricky for people in the suburbs in general, and definitely if you have an HOA is kind of tough. I think I know several people that are very married to their green grass, their golf course green grass. So again, if any of you happen to be one of those green grass people, just take what I'm going to say and see where you can fit stuff in, okay? The problem with pesticide use is people broadly spray all over the place and they kill everything. So a lot of people are like, I used to see ladybugs all the time when I was young. Well, you're not going to in a sprayed lawn because you've just killed them all with the pesticide. I'm sure folks don't mean to do that. What they're thinking is they want to get rid of the bad pests, and I understand that. And I don't think anybody's ever pointed out that, but you're killing everything. Okay. So what I try to encourage people to do is, if you can cut back like little bits and little bits and little bits, and then if you need to use Roundup on a poison ivy patch, there are other things like gardener's grade vinegar or something like that. That's a 40% vinegar solution. You can get it probably at some nurseries. You can certainly get it on Amazon. But just again, small steps, just decrease to the point of not using it at all would be great. There are organic yard people. What am I trying to say? Anyway, organic companies that you can use to help keep your yard fertilized and try to keep some of the creepy crawlies that you don't want. But apparently you need to be you need to be vigilant as to who it is, or that they're truly organic, or you might not be getting what you think. Okay, so that is one way to practice sustainable gardening. On the far right, you can see that is our front sidewalk. So during quarantine, my husband and I used that time to bust up our sidewalk. Like, we just had one of those regular old L-shaped sidewalks. We busted that up, put in these little, what do you call them? Like little paver rocks. And that is creeping time in between all the rocks. Now, I will tell you that we did that on the side of our house, and in my experience, creeping time cannot take heavy foot traffic. So if you are a person who, I would say oddly, uses your front door in and out all the time, that's probably not going to look so great. But we don't go in and out of our front door all the time. We, like a lot of people, go in through our garage, so that stays nice and tidy. But again, it gets flowers, and you can use it for cooking and all that kind of thing. And so this spot right here, where that sidewalk is actually a perfect example of where I like to encourage people to start. If just say you have a big yard of nothingness, and you're like, my gosh, I don't have time for like that center picture. That is our front yard. And again, most of that is are perennials, but I'm also a zinnia freak, so I will plant thousands, hundreds of seeds, which turns into thousands of blooms. Okay, so maybe you don't have time or space or ability or money for all of that, but if you can start just around a sidewalk, so you can see to the left of that sidewalk is a little pathway. So maybe you add some native plants, some low-lying native plants there. I am never going to rip off the top of my head all of a sudden what all those little plants are, but they actually have goldenrod, short goldenrod, and goldenrod is a keystone species. And again, off the top of my head, a keystone species just means it's a big fat hairy deal, and it does a whole lot of good without getting technical, because I'm not going to remember that right now. If you look to the right of that sidewalk, that is a little spot, like, I don't even know, it's 2 by 2, but there are quite a few native plants in there, including a gray goldenrod, including, I put some zinnias in there, some marigold, some succulents like sedum. There's coreopsis in there, leotris. That's actually not what I meant. There's another L word. Anyway, there's a whole host of a lot of things in there, including a little water. It's a little water tray I put in there in the summer too. So you can pack a lot of stuff into a very small space and not get overwhelmed. So next slide, please. So these are just a few ideas. So you can see again, that bottom left picture, that was our yard before. The top is now close to what it looks like. The middle picture, just kind of an evolution. That far right picture, another evolution of how our yard started to be. But I would encourage you, even if it's just a little corner or along a sidewalk, you can make a spot for nature. It does not mean it has to be your whole yard. Next slide, please. So this video, so if you want to click that again, it'll start the video. This is the shady side of our house, and the big evergreens are my neighbor's house, are my neighbor's property. To the right there, you can see those raised beds. That started out as our vegetable garden. I like to keep things structured, nice and tidy. This is what we call the woods. You can see my giant chicken coop back there, but I've made this a space because I'm a huge rainforest person, traveled to them, study about them. I wanted that same feeling in my own suburban backyard. So I've tried to create all of that. Back there are all native plants, just viburnums, a couple of different viburnums, high bush cranberries. I'm shocked I'm ripping these off the top of my head. Hellebores, ferns, those aren't native, but our little pond there. So I think then you can go to the next slide. Yep, that's another spot. Now for me, I'll just throw this out there in case you're trying to get some landscape ideas. I think that video should start with a click. Yeah, so we keep our beds very structured. That's a personal preference. but I will tell you definitely it would probably, if you live in the suburbs, be the preference in your front yard of all of your neighbors. Okay. This is our gigantic chicken coop shed. So that is clearly not part of the 5 points, but that is a sustainability thing on my part. I want to know where my food is coming from, but more just it's fun to have chickens. I have a permit and all that stuff. Only hens, no roosters. But you can see that we've taken little spaces where ordinarily people may not do a lot and just created all of these spots. Okay. So what we've done is you create one spot. Maybe it's a circle, maybe it's a kidney bean, maybe it's just a path. And then you create another spot and another spot. And I make pathways to connect those spots because I love the way they feel. It makes it feel a little bit more magical. And we have grandkids, and they have made, I've had several kids outside of our grandkids who aren't at our house a lot make note that they love all the little pathways because kids feel it, whether they know what they're talking about or not. They like the way it feels. And that's why I created them. So, next slide, please. Oh, I think it started over. I think you have to, yep, there we go. So, like this says, every spot in your yard. Oh, this is a video, I think. Every spot in your yard holds another opportunity, and that's true. So, I have a raised garden bed. So, obviously, vegetables aren't part of the National Wildlife Federation thing. But look, uh, there's a whole host of things to talk about gardening, whether it's vegetable gardening or this butterfly gardening and nature gardening and all that kind of stuff, of how good it is for your physical health, how exceptionally fantastic it is for your mental health. But it's just finding little spaces where you can work it all in. And so we've really, look, if you have a bunch of boys that want to play football, this isn't the yard for you, but there's still plenty of spot to let run around, walk around, discover and enjoy, and not just have your whole enjoyment be just a patio with chairs on it. Even if you did all the pots on the patio, that's totally fine as well. Next slide, please. I probably better pick up the pace so there is time for questions. So this is just, you can see part of our patio. And I have a few things, I don't think it's in this slide, but we have a few things on our patio as well, raised beds, and there are raised beds that you can get that are waist height. So if you have a physical disability, you can garden a little bit too. I mean, even if it is a raised bed that's what, 2x4, you can still pack some pollinator plants in there and attract butterflies. Because like I said, it didn't take much to have a black swallowtail butterfly visit my fennel. And that's the only fennel plant I didn't mention. That was the only one I had. It's not like I had a field of fennel. I just had one. So anyway, some anchor trees. If you can just get one native tree, one native bush, and a couple of native pollinator plants, hey, that is better than nothing at all. And that is way better than most people do. So that would be amazing. And you'll have less to mow the more little pathways and spots that you create. Next slide, please. Yep. I think you just click it again and it'll go to there we go. So you can see the left was better than it was when we bought the house, but then it evolved to this pond. My husband built this pond from scratch, and we just have a pathway to there and full of native plants. A couple, like peonies, don't really do anything. They reminded me of my grandmother, but I kept one and got rid of the rest because they don't do anything except for ants. So, and they take up too much space for what I want to do. So next yard, please, or next slide, please. Oh, I guess that was a video. You can probably skip to the next slide, actually. That's just showing another pathway. So you can see that is a huge difference. Now, again, number one, I'm very high strung and I have a lot of energy. But number two, this is over the course of several years, okay? This was not done in a weekend. Number one, it's a lot of time, but if you got the time, then groovy. It is also, I'm not gonna lie, quite a bit of money. If I were to add it all up, I don't even want to see the number, but that's why little by little, and I planted by seeds in the beginning instead of plants because plants are more expensive than seeds. So again, just little by little, and then we've gotten to where we are now. So next slide, please. So, yep, that's a video. We live in Columbus, and many parts of Columbus, zoned Columbus they don't really care what you do. And we do not have an HOA because you're looking at the past president of our homeowners association, and it's not that fancy of a homeowners association. So we could have a hell strip. Okay, so that spot between, I think you Clintonville folks are quite familiar with this, but that strip of grass that the city owns between the street and the sidewalk, I've eradicated all of that, and it's full of native flowering plants. And I always plop some little short zinnias, zinnitas, or Lilliput zinnias grow really well in there too because they're not too tall because that looks kind of awkward in there. So that's a really great spot for a whole bed of flowers. So next slide, please. Oh yeah. So this is the whole other side of our house, and oh yeah, that's a video if you want to click on that. So this again was one big vast thing of nothingness. I mean, it just didn't have anything, but now we have like a walkway. That's all way tidier than that looks right now. But these native trees that you can get, red twig dogwoods, viburnum, elderberries, high bush cranberries, they make a great separation between you and your neighbors. So if you are not allowed to have a fence, I mean, certainly you can just get evergreens, or you can pepper in some evergreens and elderberries or high bush cranberries or viburnums, because they will all help to form a fence. And if you're allowed to have landscaping, then that will look really great. And you've planted native. So next slide, please. So that's me. That's my blog, or my podcast. Everything's called Backyard Columbus. Everything has that same picture on it, so you'll know that you got the right one. But my podcast is on everywhere you get podcasts, I think, except for Google so far, because I keep forgetting about it. Backyard Columbus on all the social platforms, and I have a website. The Nature Scoop is written by a wonderful woman, Tony Stahl, and she is a habitat ambassador as well. Kind of what do you say, the grand poobah, and she got me into it. So she does a very comprehensive newsletter every month that is full of a lot of information. So that's the email address. She does it the old-fashioned way, so she adds you by hand. So you would need to reach out to her to be added to the list, or she's on Facebook as well, and I don't know if it's called Nature Scoop, but you can friend her or whatever on there. So next slide, please. Yes, so that is it. So if anybody has any questions, or if I can clarify anything, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to me go on and on about backyard habitats.
Thank you, Kathy. Annalisa, would you like to MC some questions or?
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for that presentation. I loved all the pictures and the videos. It's I don't know if anyone else felt inspired, but I'm definitely gonna be putting in some water features. I've been saying that every year, but this is the year. I feel it. So if anyone has any questions, I believe you've answered all the questions. You answered all the questions in the Zoom as we went along, which is awesome. But if anyone wants to drop in with their mic, you can ask in person, or if you want to drop it in the chat and I can read it aloud, or Kathy can also use your eyes
Yeah,
and
if you don't mind, somebody wanted to know in the first slide what was in the bluebird feeder. So I have a client who's a birder and he uses mealworms. I do not. The only birds in my backyard that get mealworms are my chickens. But actually, the bluebirds absolutely love chipped sunflower seeds. I get them at a cooperative. Oh shoot, it's in Delaware. Champion Feed and Supply. So they have chipped sunflowers, like the middles of the sunflower, not the whole seeds. They love it. I've had flickers, woodpeckers, bluebirds, all kinds of things. So a little bit more expensive than the average bird seed. And as a matter of fact, they won't even use the other feeder that has regular bird seed in it. They absolutely loved the chipped sunflower seeds. That's the only place I found it so far. I don't even think that what's that bird place here? I forgot the bird company here in town.
Wild Birds Unlimited.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I the last time I was in there, I didn't see it, but I get all my stuff from Champion Feed and Supply in Delaware, so I'm not sure if they have it or if the city folks, is that what they're called, in Clintonville, if they would have it, chipped sunflower seeds. Anyway, that's what was in the bird feeder.
Oakland Nursery has chipped sunflower seeds and
Oh,
often
okay.
sales on it.
Ah, nice.
And you can just buy it loose, you know.
That's a lot closer than Delaware. For me,
Yeah,
I should say. I live much closer to Oakland Nursery.
try
Suzanne,
it.
did you have a
Yeah,
question?
I had my hand up. Yeah, so I have a question. Kathy, have you experimented with clover in your green, in your grassy spaces?
I have clover that has naturally occurred. I have not purposefully planted it. We have plenty of clover that comes up and we do not treat. Look, this is actually a perfect example. Our grass, now look, it's not a golf course grass, but it's nice and green and we don't do anything to it. We let the leaves, we naturally mulch them in and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think it looks too bad. It's probably not going to make the golf course green people very happy, but the presentation of it is good. I definitely let the clover grow also because when I have guests come over, they love to pick it and feed it to the chickens because our chickens absolutely love clover. So it's a treat for them when anybody comes over. Little kids like to feed it to them. They hold it in their little hands. I have ground cover, you know, like clover ground cover that hypothetically I put in the beds every fall to, you know, fertilize those areas, but I've done that once because I always forget.
Yeah, as a
So
cover
yes and
crop,
no.
you mean as a cover crop in your
Yeah, as a
place?
cover,
Yeah.
as a cover crop for my raised vegetable beds and even the landscaped areas. But again, like I said, I've done that once because fall hits and I'm trying to do a whole bunch of things and we usually travel in the fall. So I've done it once, but hypothetically, I love the idea of it.
Betsy Shaw had a question. Her question was, do you also have water in shallow dishes?
I have one, you know, one of them I have, we had a crock pot broke, but the top was still good. So I turned it upside down and put it on, actually it was the top of a chimney that also broke. Put it in that forested area so it's a shallow dish for for water. Um, Overwhelmingly I do have a couple of bird baths also, like shallow bird baths. And there are spots in our ponds where they can perch on something because I have huge rocks in there and the logs that they can perch on there. But yeah, we have, and I have a hanging waterer for them, but a couple of little shallow dishes. That gets to be, for me, it gets to be a matter of time. It's why I also don't have a lot of hanging baskets everywhere because the time it takes for me to make sure all of those things are clean or full or watered, it just gets to be too much sometimes.
Can I ask a question? Sorry for coughing earlier. I'm a little sick today. There's a creature that I would love to see come back to my yard. It's a moth that is so big that it looks kind of like hummingbird. And
Oh, the hummingbird moth?
I'd seen it on some phlox that I had in my front garden beds. What do you think about that? I'm just thinking of like some of my favorites that are just like really notable.
Oh, I actually have I have one of the host plants for that hummingbird clearwing moth. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It might be a viburnum, it might be a pussy willow. I don't remember honestly, but I have it. I regularly inspect my stuff like a little kid every fall when the leaves fall off to see if there's any cocoon on there. But, just by planting these native things, I've had that hummingbird moth go to zinnias and probably the phlox and something else, but it's been in our yard several times. So those are always a real treat to see. But
Your mantis nests were super cool looking.
I'm pretty geeked out because I also have one on the house. And I have a video, of course, of her laying that whole nest on the house. And then I found two more that were on the house from last year. So they're going crazy. I'm probably going to repopulate all of Columbus with our own praying mantises. Native praying mantises, by the way.
Can you share, because this is something that I've seen a lot, it bothers me, is when there's a lot of people that I've seen selling praying mantid pods at like the farmers market. I even saw it at Clintonville farmers market last year, and they were big. So can you share how, if you were out there and you want to add the native insects to your yard, how do you distinguish between a native and a non-native, even if you think maybe the person selling it to you is not maybe transparent about it? How can you distinguish between a native praying mantid and a non-native?
It's actually very easy. A non-native praying mantis, more than likely, like the Chinese mantids, though, and that's the one that a lot of people are selling, I think. They are about like this big. Like you can see that praying mantis nest, that Utica looks way bigger than it is. That is no longer than a quarter. And I mean, it is like an inch long and a half an inch wide. Okay. If it is rounder, like big and round, that is a non-native praying mantis Utica nest, and that's would not be what you want. And so, I mean, number one, you can ask them, is it a Carolina mantis nest? But if it is the size of a 50-cent piece and they say yes, they're lying to you. If it's like poofy and round, they are either they don't know or they're lying. So it should be flat, kind of, and you can see if you were really to zoom in on, if you, I don't know how well other people can see it, but if you really look at that thing or look up Carolina Mantis Utica, it's Ootheca, but a Carolina Mantis nest, you'll see it's ridgy and it looks like segmented and it's quite small. So that would be a very easy way. The problem with those praying mantises, the Chinese mantids or the European mantids, they are way, way bigger than our native Carolina mantises and they will kill them. So then what happens is the big man wins, and they could just say everybody went crazy and bought a whole bunch of Chinese mantid nests and we've repopulated Columbus with them. They will wipe out the native ones. And so, there's a place for everyone, but they need to stay in their own little areas and leave our little Carolina mantises because they're cool too. I love insects, but they will wipe out our native ones. So yeah, if it's not small and like this one, then do not get it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a big thing with me.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, how long do you think you spend in your yard, peak summertime, when everything's out blooming? How much do you time, not just out in your yard hanging out, but caring for
Oh,
weeding and watering and things? How much time do you think you spend?
so that's a good question because my mom, who knows all about my yard, every year she says, This is so much work. This is so much work. Well, it was so much work in the beginning. The amount of work I put into it now, and my husband as well, but I'll say for me personally, the amount of work that I put into it now is mostly tinkering. You know, it's because I want to be out there and I want to be doing things and looking for things, but weeding, here's a really awesome thing. So in the beginning, just say you've got extra money to spend and you put in a landscape bed and you go buy plants and you put in all these baby plants, okay? Because that's the cheapest way to do it, is to buy them small and let them grow. Well, then you've got all this space around them. So there's more time spent then because the weeds have a chance to get in. The weed seeds have a chance to drop in because you have all these open spaces. But now our yard is to the point that all the landscape beds are to the point that everything has grown up. And so they crowd out the weeds. So it's not nearly as much. Like if I spent one weekend in the beginning, maybe a day and a half in the middle, or even just one weekend in the middle, that's really all the hard work, unless I literally want to change something out, okay? But like just tidying up and cleaning, as long as you get the weeds out in the beginning and you put down a good layer of non-dyed mulch, like, you know, not colored mulch, there's really not a lot of work after that. My work comes in is because I want to add something else, or I'm trying to look for eggs or stock my frogs, or I just do all that all summer long. So that's where my hours come in. But hours spent working, honestly, not a lot, truly. So, oh yeah, I see. Yep. We actually, to the mantis point, Suzanne said all mantises are cannibals, which is very true. We actually had the native praying Carolina mantis lay eggs on a house plant off the top, a chef Lara that was on our front porch. And so the middle of last winter, let's call it February, I looked on my windowsill and I'm like, what is all of this dirt all over our front windowsill? Well, it had been long enough and warm enough that that the praying mantis babies like got out. They emerged, or whatever you call it. They were all over the window, all over the windowsill. Not very many made it because number one, they didn't have any food except each other, and number two, they couldn't get out because I didn't even know they were there. But I have the most beautiful picture. You know, it's a great big picture. And right in the middle of the plant is this little teeny weeny praying mantis just looking around. My neighbor girl, you know, we've infected her brain too. So she tried to raise one. I don't know if it lasted very long, but there was nothing we could do because it was the middle of winter. So there was nowhere to put them. But it's kind of a fun little experience.
I am green with envy. That is a great story.
It was fun.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Cathy Tiffany. Thank you, Annalisa, for emceeing. Clintonville Green Team, thanks for everyone that jumped in and asked a question. We'll send the recording out to everyone that registered, and then we'll post it to clintonvillegreenteam.org.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
You bet. You did a great job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.